Welcome to the World Nomads podcast, delivered by World Nomads, the travel lifestyle and insurance brand.
There's something about the islands here that touches people's souls.
Hopefully we're making an impact in the world that people will stop killing and culling sharks.
It looked like snot and it smelled bad, but then let that put you off. It was good for you.
What else in the world you're going to see the condor 3 meters right in front of you?
No, absolutely.
There.
I'm not sure if I want to see the condor 3 meters in front of me.
So many things in our society that are throwaway, and we see those things on our beaches, on our coastline.
Has anyone ever pooped themselves?
Sometimes the Germans can come off as cold.
I think it's important to remember what has happened, but also look forward to into the future and be positive about it. And that's, I think, what Germans are.
It offers travellers the opportunity to teach English to children and experience the Panamanian... Oh, that's going to be...
Speaking of teaching English...
I've got to learn to speak it.
We were all told that you can't take a leak into the river. You can't urinate into the river because there's a parasite that will swim up your urine stream.
Yeah, Phil, you...
An idiot?
It's not your usual travel podcast. It's everything for the adventurous, independent traveller.
Hi, and thanks for choosing to listen to the World Nomads podcast, where in this episode we're going to find out more about Uruguay, or Uruguay. It has a certain pronunciation that we as Australians can't kind of get our tongues around.
Okay, Uruguay is in the southeast of South America. It's got Argentina on the west and Brazil to the north and the east, and of course the Atlantic Ocean and the south and the southeast. It's about 3.3 million people in the country, and most of them, 1.8 million of them, live in the metropolitan area of the capital and largest city, Montevideo.
Oh, well, Sarah from AirTrex returns in this episode, and she has a World Nomads deal flying from LA, taking in Uruguay and return. And just listening to you talking about that concentration of people in Montevideo, I almost said Montevideo. Is it any wonder that there are these beautiful remote beaches that you can go and just get lost on?
I know. I think the theme that we will find from today is that this is, I hate, it's such a cliche, but it's a hidden gem in South America, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sarah will touch on that. Uruguay is a favourite among digital nomads too. And Johnny FD is going to share some tips on how you can travel and work. Dab-peirson. Now remember Dan, we featured him in his amazing nomad. He walked across Cuba. He shares with us why he loves Uruguay, one of his favourite places. And we also welcome back another previous guest in Sarah. Sarah and Tim on the 20-month-long honeymoon. Yes.
Any more arguments?
Yes.
Let's find out.
Yes, we'll find out. And we'll also touch on their trip that included Uruguay. But we can't start without your quiz question.
Okay, pretty simple one today. Name a famous Uruguayan. Sorry.
It just say it how we say it.
Okay. Name a famous Uruguayan.
That's much better. AirTrex, Phil, is a leader in multi-stop international travel. We've spoken to Sarah from AirTrex before, but we have her back on the podcast to tell us why Uruguay is so special.
Well, for one thing, it's sort of difficult to get there. For most international destinations, you've got to go through Santiago or Buenos Aires or through Brazil. And to get to most of the country, the best way to get around is actually not by plane. It's by bus or by boat. And there are some really remote and beautiful places in Uruguay that I think are on everybody's bucket list or should be.
All right. Well, share a few of those then.
Well, I mean, I have two that I wrote down that I think they're actually not that hidden gem anymore. They're two of the most popular places to visit. One is Cabo Polonio, which is pretty remote. But so that's one of the most remote and beautiful natural places you can go to in Uruguay. And Colonial de Sacramento, which is actually one of the most accessible places. It's a quick ferry ride from Buenos Aires. You can also get there from Montevideo. And there are just so many really great natural places to visit and see in Uruguay. That's one of the reasons that I would want to go there. To see all the different coastal regions, and also in the interior, there's a lot of really beautiful different natural landscapes, obviously.
So being remote, that natural beauty's been preserved.
Yes, definitely.
So, but what is it like? I mean, is it, is it like Patagonia? Is it arid? Is it lush? What sort of natural landscape is it?
Well, I think you've got a few different types of natural landscape there. I think the further you go into the interior, do you know they actually have a wine region there? with a particular type of grape that's only grown there. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but you have a lot of different climate zones. I think when a lot of people think about Uruguay, they think about, well, there's a lot of beautiful beaches, because I think those are the images that we see. But I think there's kind of a diverse ecological variety throughout the country, especially the closer you get to Brazil and Paraguay. You get more into the rainforesty type.
It seems to be too, each podcast that we do, increasingly we're finding surf havens, and Uruguay is a surf haven as well.
Yes, I actually did not know that, but I believe it. There's a lot of miles of coastline. I think a lot of people that go there do it as a mini break from Argentina. So they're in Buenos Aires and they say, oh, I'm just going to go for a few days. But if I were going to go, I would probably try and go for 3 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, because I think that there are so many different things to do there. They definitely have gauchos. I learned recently that the carnival there is one of the longest carnivals in the world. It's 40 days. Of nonstop parties. I mean, I guess that's the duration of Lent, but I think that would be a fun thing to go and see there. Definitely do some wine tasting, do a lot of hiking. Some of the remote coastal areas are things that I would definitely like to visit.
What about culturally too, the cobbled streets that you see and read about?
Absolutely. I always look for books written that are set in the places that I'm going to, or written by authors who are from the country that I'm visiting, because I think that understanding a little bit about the history of a place and what inspires its artists is one of the coolest ways to experience those cultures when you're there visiting.
I've actually been thinking of South America as kind of like Southeast Asia was 20 years ago, 25 years ago or so, when that was like, the ultimate backpacking destination. And I think that focus has now turned over to South America because there is so much to explore and it's not overdeveloped.
And it's safe.
And there's a pretty amazing sort of variety of culture.
Yes, definitely. And do you know what else we're seeing in South America is that people that want to work and travel, digital nomads, or people who want to take a sabbatical from work and go travel around, are going to South America also. So you see people spending a month in Buenos Aires working from a co-working space, spending a month in Lima working from a co-working space, spending a month in Montevideo working from a co-working space. There's a whole culture of people who are working and traveling in that region of the world as well. One of the things that I like about Uruguay, because we do specialize in complex multi-stop trips, is that you can't really fly directly there. So there's always an opportunity to add a stopover. You're coming from Australia, stop over in Santiago, add Buenos Aires also maybe, stop over a few places in Argentina on your way there, stop over in Peru on your way back. And it's the same is true from North America. You can get, if you're paying for a flight to Uruguay, you can get more value for your money. Like you go to more places because you have to connect somewhere on your way there.
And Sarah has created a budget-friendly itinerary for us to share with our podcast listeners. It goes from LA to Lima, Montevideo, Buenos Aires, Santiago, and back to LA. Check it out in show notes. And in that chat, Sarah mentioned Uruguay as a popular destination for digital nomads. And increasingly, people are traveling around the world. They're either working online for the existing company or they're making money out of travel. Now, you interviewed this guy.
I know. He's like one of the most popular ones. He's very successful. And the great thing about Johnny FD is he shares his success. He shows how he does it. I thought I'd talk to him and ask him to show us how he makes money and travels the world.
Yeah, so I had a corporate job in California and I went to Thailand on vacation exactly 10 years ago, pretty much today. And I discovered how nice it was just to be able to walk around in flip-flops and a t-shirt and do things like go scuba diving, which is something I never thought possible. It's something I've always seen on Discovery Channel, on National Geographic, but I never thought I could do it. And the very first time I went scuba diving, I thought, this is it. Like, why am I putting off life? Why am I working so hard to one day retire and be able to hopefully still have the energy and be physically be able to do these things? Why not do it now?
So what did you do about that?
Well, luckily I had just read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, literally on the plane ride over to Thailand. And I had everything fresh in my mind. And because it was a 3-hour boat ride from Phuket, Thailand, out to the island that I've been diving on, I had a lot of time to think. So I borrowed a pen and paper, and I just started writing down one of the exercises that I had remembered from the book. And it was basically, if everything didn't work out, let's say I quit my job, it's all my stuff, and I moved to Thailand, and it didn't work out, how long would it take me to get back to exactly where I was? So I had to write down, find a new apartment, get a new car, get a new job, buy new clothes, buy new appliances. And realistically, it would only take, 4 months to get back to exactly where I was. And if anything, I'd probably be better off because I would have, new stuff. I would probably have a new job that I liked even more. And during those 4 months, I could just stay with family or I could stay with friends. And that's when I decided. I said, let me give the scuba diving thing a shot. They had a training program that wasn't that expensive. To be a dive master is just, you can do it for about $1,500, $1,500. And after that, you're not going to earn a lot of money, but you're going to be able to follow your passions and, be able to dive really anywhere in the world while working. So that's what I did for the next basically 3 or 4 years.
For a lot of people, that would be enough. That sounds like living the dream, but you took it a little bit further as well?
While I was scuba diving, I decided to also pick up the Thai sport of kickboxing, of Muay Thai. So I started training and also basically traveling around Thailand, going to different gyms and different camps to do that. So I had found my second passion. But what I had realized is that even though I enjoyed kickboxing, I enjoyed scuba diving, when I had turned 30, my body started kind of, just, I don't want to say breaking down, but I knew I couldn't do this forever. And I remember there was this old British guy named Dave that was just so grumpy all the time. And I couldn't understand why, because we would wake up on this beautiful island. It was Koh Tao in Thailand. And all we had to do, our only responsibility for the day was to go scuba diving and then just hang out at the bar. And I thought, why is this guy so grumpy? And I realized it was because he was stuck. He probably started off really loving scuba diving, really enjoying his life, being on these islands and, having the option to be able to not just dive on that island, but to move to the Caribbean or move to Borneo, move to Australia and work there. And I feel like if I stayed much longer, if I stayed another 5 years or 10 years, I would probably lose that passion I had for diving, for meeting new travelers, for waking up early and seeing the sunrise. I didn't want that to happen. I'm still going to scuba dive, but I want to be able to make enough money to be able to go as a guest and not have it be tied to my job anymore. There wasn't a lot of information about being a digital nomad or making money online. I had never really met anyone. The only person I heard of was Tim Ferriss, and I didn't have access to him. Nowadays, it's a lot easier with, podcasts like Travel Like a Boss or blogs like, johnnyfe.com and all these other people that write about living this lifestyle. None of that existed before. So the only thing I could think of was publishing a book. And I figured, hey, I had figured out this way where I was able to quit my job and live around not only Thailand, but really around the world, following my passions and doing what I loved and living really cheaply. I bet a lot of the lessons I've learned from this process, other people would benefit from. And if anything else, if nothing else, people would enjoy the story because it was pretty fun, exploring the world on a $600 a month budget for the past couple of years. So I wrote a book called 12 Weeks in Thailand, The Good Life on the Cheap. And I self-published it on Amazon Kindle. And it worked. I realized, wow, it's actually possible to make money online. I just need to figure out how to market it better. So instead of making $200 a month from the book, which wasn't enough to even live in Thailand at the time, to if I can make $600 a month, I knew that was enough to continue living in Thailand pretty much forever. And that's how I got into, the world of online marketing, was really just trying to figure out how I can better market my books.
You're pretty open about how much you make now and how you go about making it. Why aren't you keeping this secret to yourself? Why are you sharing this?
Yeah, honestly, it was a big crossroads when I first decided to publish an income report, probably 3.5 years ago now. I've been writing them every month. I haven't missed a single month in the last 3 years. And I did it because I think the first income report I ever saw anybody write online was Pat Flynn. And he was making, something crazy. I think he makes like $1 million a year or something.
Wow.
And even though it was inspirational to be able to see someone, achieve that much, that high of a level, I didn't think it'd be possible for me because it was so far ahead. And I figured there's a lot of people who are going to be in that same position where they're just going to look at it and be like, okay, like that's great for him, but that's not possible for me. And at that time, I was only making about $2,000 or $3,000 a month, which to me was amazing because that was, more than enough to live in Thailand. It was enough to save. It was enough to travel. And really, it was the dream. And I figured, hey, I bet you there's a lot of people who just want to get to this point, and if they can see someone else who's made it to this like first level, that could inspire them to try to do the same instead of just seeing this big number that it's hard to get to. And what's really great is as my personal income had grown and I started adding additional streams of online income, people saw that journey. So people can literally go back to 2013 and look at my first income reports and kind of just follow that journey slowly there. And they can say, okay, yeah, I can see how you did that. I can see how you added in a new stream here. I can see how you grew this one. And I can see how you got to where he is now, which means I can see myself doing that as well.
Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day in Nepal to have a chat to us. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone happy travels wherever you guys are. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media or just leave a comment on my blog.
We will have a link to Johnny FD's blog, and he does include a travel and income report.
Yep.
It's really transparent. This is how I've earned the money. This is how much I earned, and this is what I've spent it on.
I think the thing about that is that you have to be dedicated to it. You actually have to put in the work to start off with. There's no such thing as a get-rich-quick scheme, and I think you need to put the groundwork in at the beginning, and then it just rolls on and rolls on. I think that's the trick.
Yeah, he's got plenty of great advice, so you need to check out his blog. Hey, let's get some travel news.
Okie dokie. Scientists have revealed that the place in an airport that harbours the most germs, and no, it's not the public toilet, it's the trays at the security check.
Ooh.
All those shoes being placed in the trays, plus unwashed hands putting personal items in them. The most common virus detected was rhinovirus, which causes the common cold. So it might be, it's not the aircraft air conditioning that's giving you that cold when you travel. You're getting it from the trays at the check-in.
Okay.
At the security check.
Yeah, a lot of people complain they've picked up colds from the air conditioning.
Yeah, I think it's the trays.
Now, what's your routine when you take a seat on a plane?
Oh, look, I take
random question.
Random question. I take hand wipes, antibacterial hand wipes, antiseptic hand wipes, and I'll wipe down especially the remote control for the TV and all the surfaces that you're going to be touching.
How many times have you been sick when you've flown?
Yeah, a couple of times.
Really? I've never had an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're the one dropping all the germs everywhere, mate.
Maybe I am. What else is happening in travel news?
Florence is banning visitors from eating panini, pizza and focaccia on the pavement and shop doorsteps. I know they've been cracking down on it, but now it's an official city law and you could be fined anywhere between 150 and 500 euros. The ban applies to streets and piazzas around a very popular delicatessen in the city centre. It's called the Alla Antico Vineo, the old wine merchant, and it's between the Uffizi Gallery and the Palazzo Vecchio.
Not the sandwich place that brings tears to your eyes?
No, that's what I was just going to say. This is described on TripAdvisor as home of the world's best sandwich, but we know that's a lie.
Yeah, we do. Go back to the podcast on Italy and you'll hear all about that.
And the sandwich down in Sicily that made one of our travellers cry. It was so good. Anyway, watch where you eat your snacks. Condé Nast UK has released its best list, best country, best city, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Best country, it says, is Italy, obviously. Best city, Paris. Best country for people, Thailand. Yep. And the best city for architecture, they named as York in the UK, which is true. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Very good. And in the US, Lifehacker has listed the best and cheapest places to travel this fall. Chicago, San Jose del Cabo, Copenhagen, Barcelona, San Diego and Boston are all about 30% cheaper to fly to at this time of year. And the accommodations, comparably cheap too. So
that rolled off the tongue, didn't it?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Comparably cheap. Thanks for that, Phil. Now, remember dab-peirson? We highlighted him as an amazing nomad after walking across Cuba. Dan's adventures have taken him...
Wait a minute.
Oh, those in glass houses, eh? That's terrible. Dan's adventures have taken him to more than 50 countries, including Uruguay. Welcome back to the podcast, Dan.
Thanks so much. I'm thrilled to chat about one of my favorite places in Latin America.
Look, you're just back from Norway, but you were really happy to talk about Uruguay.
Thrilled to chat about Uruguay, which is one of my favorite countries in the world and a place I discovered very much, very randomly and serendipitously while living in Buenos Aires, Argentina, back in 2008, 2009. A friend of my mom's, I grew up in New York, and a friend of my mom's, her family happened to own this little tiny little hotel on the coast of Uruguay. So they invited me to come out that January, which of course is summer in the southern hemisphere, and just discovered this tiny little village and had just the most phenomenal time. So it's really tucked away, and there's so many different gems across the country. So all that to say, yeah, I'm very passionate about that country. It's such a wonderful place.
We spoke to Sarah from AirTreks earlier in the podcast, and she said that, a lot of that coast is really remote.
Cool. Yeah, the places that I'm more familiar with, you arrive on a boat for sure, or at least you can. There's it's actually the fastest ferry in the world called the Buquebus, which runs from Buenos Aires to Colonia, which is the first kind of entry point into Uruguay, and then all the way to Montevideo. And then the coast itself, I access by bus, but I'm sure there's, for every amazing little town that I checked out, there's probably 5 more that are still kind of going to have to wait for my next trip for sure.
Now tell me about Montevideo. I've looked at images of it and it just looks like this super cool city.
Yeah, it's great. And I think certainly folks from Uruguay probably aren't thrilled to be thought of as like a kind of smaller neighbor in Argentina. But in so many ways, I think, at least in my opinion, it was really very refreshing to get to Montevideo after probably been in Buenos Aires for 6 or 8 months. And just kind of reaching a much smaller city that felt so much more manageable and accessible and less crowded, and just very much just a very kind of accessible place. So yeah, I love Montevideo. It's a great little city.
Now, Lonely Planet, this is how Lonely Planet describes Uruguay. Wedged like a grape between Brazil's gargantuan thumb and Argentina's long forefinger, Uruguay has always been something of an underdog, which you've just mentioned. Yet after 2 centuries living in the shadow of its neighbours, South America's smallest country is finally getting well-deserved recognition. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think I did a bit of kind of research just after you asked me to come on the show, and some of kind of the things that I always thought about the country were confirmed. I mean, Uruguay ranked first in Latin America in democracy, peace, low perception of corruption, freedom of the press, size of the middle class, prosperity. So across all these different matrices, it's really a pretty kind of awesome place to live. And I guess coming from Norway, and for readers who can't jump on my accent, I'm from the United States. So like now spending time in all of these smaller countries that are more socialist or left-leaning, for lack of a better word, they're just pleasant places to spend time. And I think for good reason, yeah. Probably most people, particularly folks who are a bit older, might recognize Punta del Este. I've actually never been, but I've heard it described as the kind of French Riviera of South America. So it's a much more upscale, very kind of luxury destination for South Americans, which I think that's been well known for 30 or 40 people are finding out about these more hidden gems and taking time to visit a place like Montevideo that before they might have just skipped over.
Okay, so we know that it's culturally sophisticated. You spent a year there not in the city, so you can still kind of get down and dirty, for want of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a little more than a year living in Argentina, and then I was in Uruguay for probably a total of maybe a month and a half of that. But I mean, there's definitely still there's still kind of a lot of more like underground culture. And I think one of the things that I love about Uruguay is the vaquero culture, which is kind of the cowboy, and because so much of the economy is based on ranching. So there's so many opportunities, or gauchos actually. That's I think a more local term. across Argentina and Uruguay is the gauchos. There's so much kind of just local, historically driven cultural stuff that just isn't really on the radar. So totally, I totally agree.
So you could find yourself in a cow and gaucho traffic jam.
You'd probably have to get pretty far out there for like an Indian style stopping traffic for the cow. Also, because they'd probably be a little bit less patient than they might be in some place like Delhi. But I remember being on the coast, and I spent a lot of time in a town called Punta del Diablo, which I guess would translate to like the Devil's Port, which when I was there about 10 years ago was kind of just getting onto the map. So one of the things that I loved about Uruguay, especially compared to Argentina, is just huge mix of visitors that it gets. So even the beaches, and I remember being in Uruguay and seeing news coverage of Plata del Mar, which is the main beach town in Argentina, and literally like folks just packed in like sardines on this beach and so crowded. And that was like the Argentina kind of version of a beach vacation. And then being in Uruguay, literally watching that on TV on this, like in this town that just had these wide windswept beaches with so many fewer people. But of those fewer people, even though it was much less packed than Argentina, a lot of the people who were visiting were from Argentina or from Brazil or from other places, from Chile, other places in Latin America, as opposed to I think a lot of the tourism, and particularly in Buenos Aires, but I think across a lot of Argentina is very U.S.
Awesome. So we put this on the list of places that we want to visit.
Absolutely. Take me with you.
Dan is up to some exciting stuff as the founder of the Bulk Collective. We'll share a link in show notes so you can actually see for yourself. Now we're going to welcome back another friend of the World Nomads podcast. Remember Tim and Sarah?
Oh, yes.
Yep, they're the couple that are on a 20-month-long honeymoon. And it's called our 21st Century Odyssey. When we first spoke to them, the big question was, as people that have been married for some time, when are you going to have an argument?
Right.
They revealed in the last podcast that they did have one.
Yes.
They're about to reveal the second
one
that they've had.
It's a slippery slope.
And, of course, touch on Uruguay, which is another of the places that they've visited among the 40 countries they hope to tick off.
Hey, Kim.
Hey, where are you in Egypt?
We are currently in Aswan.
Doing what?
Well, at the moment, we are sitting on a boat, on a river boat on the Nile, and we just wrapped up a little boat trip around the region. Went to a Nubian village this morning. That's where I was earlier when I was messaging you. And now we're just sitting on the boat. We're going to have some tea in a little bit, and then we fly back to Cairo tonight.
Now, we have introduced you going into this chat as our friends, and it's so cool to have you back. And we want to know about this fight that you had.
Yeah, so we were in Sri Lanka about a month ago now, and we had just gotten to the town of Ella, which is just a fantastic little town kind of in the central highlands region of Sri Lanka. And there's some great hiking and little mountains that you can climb. And I had been napping all the way on the drive-in, so we got there and I was really groggy, kind of in that state when you first wake up and you're like unsure of where you are and what you're doing. And we were trying to get all our stuff together because we were immediately going to go do this hike called Little Adams Peak. And so we got there. I was trying to get my stuff together. Tim grabbed a water bottle for me, and I was like, "Oh no, I don't want a water bottle," because I didn't want to have to carry it. And he just decided to bring it anyway. And then in my groggy state, this was highly offensive because I felt like he was not listening to me and my desire to not carry a water bottle. I told him I felt robbed of my own decision-making capacity. And so we started the hike up, and we were just super snippy with each other. And Tim, to his credit, he tried to be kind. He would like look at things and be like, "Oh, look, there's like a lizard crawling by," or like, and I would just be like, "I don't care about lizards." And, we just kept hiking up, and eventually got to the top, and we were like, "Well, this is pretty, I guess. This is pretty nice. This is a good view. I guess we should just take a photo. I mean, we're here." And so we pulled out the camera to take a selfie, and then I saw our reflections, in the camera on the phone, and we both just looked like so sour and grumpy. We just burst out laughing at how ridiculous we were being. Mostly me. I was the more ridiculous one.
Never concede, Sarah. Never concede.
That's good advice, Kim. I should follow that.
Yeah. So I follow your blog, and this particular episode is on Uruguay. Did you and Tim do this when you were boyfriend and girlfriend and not part of my 21st Century Odyssey?
Yeah, we did this when we were just dating. We still had the blog back then, but it was under a different name at that time, and it was very much just a personal blog at that point. But that was what we call our first trip around the world now. And we had been dating for about 3 years, so we were just little pups. And it was about 2 months into our 11-month trip around the world that we took back in 2014.
When you think of South America, you think many things, but when you think of Uruguay, you don't really think a lot, but it's paradise.
Yeah, and that is so true, because it's actually really fitting that that's how you think of it, because when we went there, it was not, super high on our list. It's not like when we sat down and planned out our South America itinerary that we were just like, we have to go to Uruguay. It was a place that we didn't know very much about. We knew that on the map it looked pretty close to Argentina. And while we were doing some research, we learned that it's actually where a lot of the South Americans and a lot of the Argentines go on vacation. And we had been doing a ton of hiking in South America. We had just done the Inca Trail in Peru and the W Trek in Chilean Patagonia. And then when we were traveling up through Argentina, we were like, we could really use a place where we could just sit down and relax on a beach for a while. And Uruguay is perfect for that. We spent most of our time there in Punta del Este, which is just this perfect beach town. It's where a lot of the South Americans go to vacation, so it's a little bit more high end, but we stayed in kind of a budget accommodation a couple blocks from the beach and rented bicycles and biked to the beach every day and just, sat on the sand for like 5 hours every single day and took breaks to bike to the grocery store to grab lunch. And it's just, a wonderfully quiet, serene spot to just sit still after you've been on the go a lot.
Absolutely. And given that there's, I think, 3.3 million people in, as you say, Uruguay, we just cannot get our mouths around that. It's Uruguay. The majority is centred in the city of Montevideo. So a lot of those coastal areas are still just pristine and untouched and the kind of places that you dream about.
Yeah. And they're really nice. But to be fair, Montevideo is a great little city as well. Probably one of the more underrated South American capitals, in my opinion. We spent a couple of nights there on our way to and from Punta del Este. And they have... I actually just learned this when I looked it up on Wikipedia earlier. They have the world's longest pedestrian sidewalk, and it's called the Rambla, and it goes right along the coast. And we actually walked along this. It goes for 13.7 miles. We didn't walk all of it, but we walked a bit of it, and it's just really scenic, and you can cut up into the streets, into the old city, and go to the coffee shops, and there's locals walking around with their little gourds of the mate tea that they drink, and it's just a nice way to spend time.
Thank you so much for having a chat to us, and keep in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. It was good catching up.
Well, Phil, that wraps up Uruguay. Almost. Can't go without your quiz question.
Okay, name a famous Uruguayan. Well, there's not many really that outside. I mean, I'm not saying there are not famous people in Uruguay, but sort of, popular culture wise outside of Uruguay, about the closest we can get is Jorge Drexler, who won an Emmy for the soundtrack to Motorcycle Diaries. I think this is symptomatic of why Uruguay is a great destination. There's so little we know about the place, which means there's so much to discover. And I think it would be great to try and get into the heart of the place and find out what it is that matters to Uruguayans.
Well, a little bit of behind the scenes this was an incredibly difficult podcast to put together, because a lot of the people that we reached out to really did not want to share Uruguay with the rest of the world. There's this real concern that it will become one of those places that is loved to death.
Because it's so nice to start off with.
Yeah.
It's going to attract a lot of people.
Yep.
Get there early.
And do it responsibly.
Indeed.
Okay, grab the World Nomads podcast from iTunes, where you can subscribe, rate or download the Google Podcast app, and contact us by emailing podcast@worldnomads.com. Next week, I'm reaching for your toy, our destination podcast.
Australia.
It's Australia, mate. We'll see you then.
Bye.
The World Nomads podcast. Explore your boundaries.